You're doing some groundbreaking things for children across the state, and let's learn more about that because it's innovative, it's inspiring, and there is actually some real, genuine, life-changing moments that are occurring for some of these kids around the state, which is fascinating. So with that in mind, let's kick things off in a bit of a reverse order, and let's look 5, 10, 20 years into the future and legacy, right? That's a big word. If you were to put yourself in your shoes 5, 10, 20 years in the future, what would you like to see occur out of academy movement?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that you think about a lot, and that vision sometimes changes a little bit from when you start out. In terms of legacy, it's impact and positive impact. So, what I'd love to, see from our brand perspective is academy movement. When a parent's looking to enrol a kid in a school and they see that school's got an academy movement program, that brand itself is recognised as a really solid program. So if you might see various different programs that are known internationally in a school, and a parent goes, "Oh, it's got that program." That's a tick. We would love for our brand to be recognised as having true outcomes in there for the right reasons, the right KPIs, and it's recognisable. But bigger than that, I'd love to see thousands and thousands of kids that have come through a program that we've helped facilitate in a school, finding success in life, got the skills to do a career that they love. They're not forced into a job. They're certainly not going down the wrong track in life. We want to see that they found their purpose and connection to school through this program, and everything else school related for them started to fall into place more because they found that reason to belong.
Powerful stuff. It's very, very powerful, and the impact being the key word there is life-changing. We're in a time now where we see so many young kids unfortunately doing a lot of bad things in society, and I'm sure we can talk about the statistics around it later on, but there has been evidence that sport is a great model to reduce crime, to reduce social misconduct, and really bring kids together. And is that a key part of the reason behind academy movement and the program?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of factors now. I was a teacher, still technically have been for 17 years, and I've seen massive changes from the time I started as a teacher in my early 20s to now, with a few more greys in the beard. It's there's a big change and a big shift in students' ability to communicate, show leadership, work together in a team, resilience. These are all things that have dropped off quite significantly. Focus has changed a lot, and there's a number of factors there. Like it certainly got worse post COVID, engagement in school and learning.
And is that just from a disconnection standpoint over those couple of years?
Yeah, I think now kids are pretty heavily on the devices. They're doom scrolling or doing whatever they do. And TikTok's not something I ever jumped on, but apparently it's pretty time. It absorbs a lot of time in what they're doing. But when you go on a sports field, all of a sudden things that can't be taught in a textbook, like communication, teamwork, resilience, leadership, all become a natural part of what you're doing. You can't have a phone or a device out there while you're doing what you're doing on the court, field, whatever it may be. So all of a sudden it's this break from that. And there's obviously strong correlations with physical activity and overall, not only physical health, but mental health that goes along with that too. That's dropped off quite significantly. When I was at school, it was like anything you could do to get physical, you'd do. And now there's a bit of a shift there, where we're just hooked on the devices, or we're hooked on this, that, and the other thing. So sport is a incredibly powerful tool that needs to be pushed more, and it has seen a bit of a drop off in a lot of areas. But yeah, even from a social perspective, like, you don't have to tell a kid that you're either a professional athlete or it's not worth it. Like, the reason we took up sport was because it was fun and you got to play with your mates. Yeah. And so that should be still the core reason. When it comes to what we do in school, Yes, we'd love to see those kids go on to higher honours, and we've had great success there, but the thing that gets me up in the morning is the fact that they feel like they finally belong at school, and there's a reason to work harder because they're enjoying themselves. They enjoy school, they look forward to school, and they're also being exposed to a number of career pathways in sport that aren't necessarily just professional athlete or nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, because there is so much outside of it, from a data perspective, from a science perspective, from a coaching perspective. The list can go on. There's a lot of opportunities there, and it's not just professional athlete, yes or no, or no, well, off you go. That's not for you now. There's a huge scope.
Yeah, and that tends to be it. Like, a kid gets knocked back from a team or whatever, and they give up on it, and that shouldn't be the sole focus. Like, of course, that can teach you some real resilience too. Like, not everything in your life's going to go your way. You might apply for that job you were dreaming of, and you weren't successful. Does that mean you should give up and look at something else and just do something you have to do? It hopefully teaches you got to work a little bit harder. And a lot of my ex-students that went on to professional honours really found it hard once they worked into that professional sporting environment. So, there's challenges going to a profession after school, but when all of a sudden you're a little bit more in the public eye, some of the things you were sheltered from at school, protected from, being called out in front of your whole team by a coach on your size, your performance, and then you've got the media and social media and the keyboard warriors all having a go at you as a person. It's pretty tough for a kid that's 19 to deal with that pressure. And some of them pull away from it because it is too much. Like, I don't think any of us would handle being in that public eye and just being ridiculed because you dropped a ball once.
It'd be tough. It's tough to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you see it all the time. Doesn't matter what sport. A player makes the smallest of errors and they just get slaughtered online. They're slaughtered by the journos. Straight away, post-game microphone in their face. Why'd you do it? And it's like, relax. We're human.
For sure.
We make errors.
And it is like 1,000 times worse now because everybody's a critic, and it's visible. If you're looking at it in the 90s, the player could just choose not to read the newspaper or watch the sports news, and they'd be blissfully ignorant about what everyone's saying about them. But now it's in their face 24/7. So, there's a lot that sport can teach about resilience, and it's not the end of the world when you have a setback. And so, again, it's bigger than just it's PE or it's physical activity. It's we're hiding a bunch of skills in there under that sporting context, so the student doesn't realise that they're getting better at this and they're developing a really good soft skill for future careers by being part of the program.
Yeah, fully agree there, 100%. Let's take it back a little bit in time to kind of the moment the thought was born in your mind for academy movement. So where were you at the time, and what was kind of that trigger or a moment that kind of made you think, oh, hey, this would be a really great way to do things?
Yeah, it was, so I was still teaching. I was running probably the most successful rugby academy in Victoria, and certainly one of the best in Australia. In terms of how much success we had on the field and keeping students engaged, like that were generally not finishing year 12 or not going on to academic VCE pathways, that demographic, we were bucking that trend in a big way. It was a lot on me creating this program that it hadn't been there before, so I had little experience in that. I just knew what I knew from curriculum, being a head of science, and what I'd seen growing up in New Zealand that sport can do when it's played for your school. So I built that academy up that I was teaching at for 5 years. Had numerous professional players come out of that program, but massive strike rate when it came to school completion and behaviour outcomes and things like that. And it got to the point where I was probably a little bit burnt out from a teaching perspective. I was maybe feeling a little bit undervalued as a teacher, but it was just deep down I thought I could maybe do more. So I made a decision, which was a really tough decision, to leave teaching and develop this concept of academy movement, which was, well, how can I take all that hard work away from schools, and how can I get there them, impart the knowledge that I had to get an academy to a sustainable level, and at a 3-year mark after that first year, how can you take away that hard work so that teacher in charge isn't going to feel overwhelmed by the amount of work, and how can we improve that product? Because when you're a teacher, you get X number of hours to do any form of planning. What if we could get all of that product improved and take all that hard work away, so it's an even better product, because my sole focus is now developing a really strong academy program rather than having to also be a teacher and do all the stuff that teachers have to do, which is it's a pretty big workload that a lot of people don't realise. A lot of really good teachers are still working through the night and overtime, like weekends and holidays.
Yeah, they're not just there from 9 till 3, 5 days a week.
No. When I started teaching, it wasn't AI or any of that kind of stuff either to help. So you had no resources. You had to make your own, and it took hours upon hours to do that kind of stuff when you want to do it right. So that's where that came from. I was like, oh, how can I impact more kids and sort of have some more autonomy working for myself and have a crack. And I was lucky enough to have some successful mates that had done really well in business that said, I'll back you all the way with that, and I can give you as much knowledge as I can possibly give you, because I'm not a businessman. I'd never been one before. I was a teacher by trade, so you need to build that support network around you. But had a crack, and got through COVID. That happened just after I made the call to leave teaching, so that tested the resolve a little bit. And we had another major hiccup from a rugby perspective. Working with the Melbourne Rebels, they went into voluntary administration, and they were
that's true, they did, yeah,
a main funder of us, and also obviously a big brand and huge supporters of us. So that was, I don't know if in the first 5 years businesses go through some challenges. There was two pretty big ones: global pandemic and a main funder. The fact we're still here means I certainly believe in what we do, and there was a lot of people that also kept supporting to say, hey, you've got to keep going with this. Those were the moments. I'm sure there's people out there listening that have felt like maybe you've achieved everything you can in your normal 9 to 5, and you've got this idea burning. It's definitely worth, if you've got the drive to do it, cutting away a safety net and having a crack, because one of my mentors said you can always go back, but it's really hard to go forward. And so, it'll still be there if you have to go back to it, but you got to have a crack at going forward with it for sure.
That's a great attitude to have, isn't it? Yeah. And cutting the safety net is a big part of it as well. Once you remove that, you can just fully focus, and it's all up to you. Mm-hmm. You got to make it work. Mm-hmm. It's a complete mindset shift. Yep. Compared to knowing, I'll put half an effort in because I know I've got this I can fall back onto.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that first major academy, that was Fountain Gate Secondary, correct?
When I was still a teacher.
When you were still a teacher, teacher there, yeah. You mentioned that there was a number of students there that went on to professional careers, which is great. One of the key stats that I found was 25 titles across a 5-year period, which is significant. And that's from a performance perspective, which is great. Mm-hmm. But you touched on, in that time period as well, there was significant increase in Year 12 completion. Mm-hmm. And that's arguably probably the most important metric out of all of that, is that kids that traditionally maybe not have completed school, they have been able to because they've been engrossed in this academy and this program. Yep. So how does that conversation with schools happen then? So particularly after that first major result, and then you've gone out on your own, was that used as a bit of a case study to say, hey, look, we've taken from this percentage to this percentage the increase of completion, and we can do the same for you? Is that kind of the conversation you were having?
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. I'd sort of been, at the time, I was getting asked when I was sort of making this call when I was still teaching, there was other schools that were quite interested in seeing the success, and they wanted to know how to do it. And I was like, that's a lot of hours and a lot of work to kind of just let you know how to do it in a nutshell. I had maybe Victoria's CEO at the time asking about that stuff, and the Rebels wanting to make a bigger impact and and be more involved with the community. So it was very rugby centric at the time. That was the sport I was most passionate about, being a Kiwi as well. And so it was funny because when those questions were being asked, that was about the time I was deciding, hey, I wouldn't mind having a crack at something like this. And so I sort of said to them, well, yeah, I'm actually about to start this endeavour. If we want to go into a MOU together and we can approach some of these schools that are asking, I'm happy to support to grow this business. The biggest challenge you have is getting the first school to say yes. Like, we kind of knew if one school has a crack, there's a good chance that more will start to have a crack when they see how good the product is and they've got someone to call about it. But it was all very well doing this as a teacher. I had to prove myself as effectively a education consultant, and so that was the challenge. Still at times it is the challenge. Like, not everybody fully understands this program, and it's really hard to get someone to know what they don't know, and that obviously comes down to sometimes marketing and how that's put forward. It's really easy when you've got a principal that'll call up another principal in their network and go, you have to meet with Jimmy, like, this thing's doing really well at our school. That's the goal, where you've got a bit of word of mouth and hopefully they're going to come and approach you. But we've still got to get out there and spread the word, because no one fully understands it. They see academy movement. They think maybe sometimes that's to do with moving the body, but it's a movement, it's a social venture. And the word academy is a pretty overused term. Like, there's all sorts of these academies that pop up, but we're not an academy ourselves. We're a movement using an academy, and there's a level of academia involved in that word academy as well that somehow has been lost along the way too. So we've got 17 academies going at the moment. We've just signed off for another 6 for next year as well. So it's starting to flow on now, but there's some tough times in those early days approaching and getting your foot in the door, and I'm sure lots of people listening about marketing understand that challenge is pretty significant. I certainly didn't know how hard that was going to be, and you've got to look at a whole bunch of different ways to do that, for sure.
So one of the challenges there that you've just touched on is kind of the unknown around what is academy movement, what do you do, what's in it for us. And there are lots of academies, as you said, very much an overused word.
Mm-hmm.
There's other programs, sport focused, health focused, physical education focused, that are out there. And there's probably, from principals' perspective, they see one thing and they think this is the same as over here. So what differentiates academy movement with some of these other programs that are out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a couple of things. There's academies or external academies, and ones that sporting organisations might run, where the focus is completely on elite pathways and getting kids to professional level. Some of them, like the AIS and the VIS, are very, very good at doing that, and others are good at sort of selling that, but it doesn't necessarily translate when you start to look at it. So there's that side of academy, and personally I think that side of academy shouldn't be in schools. Like, the core business of schools is student outcomes and engagement and career pathways, through learning. That's not to say you don't want the sport that is being offered at the school to be really successful, because kids are drawn to that. That's a real carrot for them. But when the only sell is, we've got a hook in with whatever football club in England and you're going to get a really good shot there, it's pretty unlikely that that's true. The chances of even being discovered as a professional athlete and getting that opportunity is less than 0.1%. It's like winning the lottery in some cases, and there's probably close to 1 billion Indians out there that could have been the next Sachin Tendulkar, and just
exactly right.
Purely on population out there, you've got to pick 11 Indians from
1 billion. That's a pretty tough job.
Pretty tough, yeah.
Head of selection there is got a headache.
Can't even imagine how many natural gifted cricketers would never have been discovered in a pool that is that big. So where we're different is we lean ourselves towards what the core focus of schools, which is engaging kids in learning, connecting them to schools, getting better outcomes for those students in the classroom. developing elite behaviours, which is showing up on time, being respectful, being a good communicator, participating, all those things that are going to set them up for more success, and using sport as the vehicle for that, not the other way around. So we don't sit there and see a kid that could go to the AFL one day or play rugby for Australia or whatever, but walks around like they own the joint and doesn't toe the line and shows up late and all those kind of things. It doesn't matter how good you are at the sport if you're not good at these other things. There's no place for you in this academy. If you do value being in the academy, you'll correct those behaviours, and we give students the opportunity to do that. We know if they've been, displaying some negative habits over the past 3 years of their schooling, it's not going to change overnight just because you slap an academy movement logo on their uniform and a Melbourne Stars or a Rugby Australia logo on there. It's going to take some time to fix that up, and they're still teenagers at the end of the day. But if you can show them the light with what we're doing here and the opportunities that are going to come with it, and support them to correct those behaviours and build a culture that stamps that kind of negative behaviour out, then eventually you get a win. So a strong code of conduct there. There's a whole bunch of different things, processes that we put in place to give a student the opportunity to correct that, because if we don't, that could go down the wrong track. You'll get to a point where you've given a lot of opportunity to correct that, and if they don't want to, it's a pretty good chance that they never valued that spot anyway and they weren't taking it seriously. But that's extremely rare that we have to remove a kid once they're in there, because they're loving the learning, they're loving the on-field as well, and they're seeing a better reason to be at school. So that's our point of difference. I guess the only other one is really, you could call them like a DIY academy. So a school might have a PE teacher that's super enthusiastic and wants to start an academy or put a label of academy on it, and they're doing their best to set something up. But it's a lot of work, and I know from experience. The other thing that could potentially happen is if that teacher was to leave down the track for whatever reason, that academy generally, it starts to slip away, and then eventually because a key driver's gone, it starts to go too. So we set up our academies in a sustainable way where everybody's around the model, the school's paid for that model and they've got it, and hopefully it's still going to be there in 20, 30 years' time, because it's been set up with the right foundations in place, no matter what happens with staff turnover and things. So yeah, that's our point of difference, is we're teaching them to fish, I suppose, a little bit rather than delivering it for them every time. So yeah, it's working pretty well at the moment. Yeah.
I love that the approach isn't elite focused and it's more on the character of the individual. If we just touch on the elite side of it for one moment, we see so many stories over the years, horror stories. Someone gets to the elite level of any sport, they retire and they sit on their hands, they don't know what to do with themselves. You hear the worst stories where they fall into depressions and suicides and all these kind of bad outcomes. But even at the more simple end of it, they don't know how to get into a professional career after that, because their entire identity is around sport. So I love that your approach is on the resilience and the discipline and the habits that come with being involved in sport at any level, it doesn't matter elite or at an amateur level, building those habits that are transferable habits, because you can take those into all realms of life. You need discipline in all realms of your life. You need resilience. You need to be able to have responsibility on yourself to show up for others. Yep. Now, that's a huge part of sport, but it integrates across broader society as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's it's massive. Like, one of the things I was most proud of with some of my boys that got put on professional rugby contracts out of school was they negotiated their tertiary education as part of their contract. I often say to the rugby kids in particular, if you're not too sure, have a think about teaching, because what you're learning and coaching and doing, that's very transferable to being a teacher. And I said, look, you get through your teaching degree, and if your rugby career finishes early or you don't get renewed, and that happens all the time, you're going to get a pretty sweet gig with one of my schools for sure. I'll bring you in there as a rugby teacher, because you're qualified and you can come in, you can keep doing something you love. And so we try to guide them in whatever way to when you're making a bit of money as a player, get some education in behind you, because that whole part of your career can cut short. I think the average AFL games in a career is like 17 or something like that. It's not a lot. And where do you go after the AFL? Like, it's not like you can go to Japan and play or something like that.
It's back to state leagues or regional leagues, and that's it.
Yeah, there's only so many paid coaching and commentary jobs, and I'm pretty sure the Fox Footy's not hiring some guy that's only played 13 games for a club either. So it's about trying to find something that, how can I transfer all this elite stuff that I've learnt in sport to a career? Teaching's a great one for that. Business is a good one for that. There's a lot of things, but you've got to get a little bit of knowledge behind and have that exit plan, because you can't keep playing until you're ready to access your pension, right?
That's a lot of playing time.
Might be a handful of sports, maybe a bit of lawn bowls, something like that. But I don't know if it's a high paid gig anyway. Definitely see a few golfers that still keep it going for a while, but it's tricky.
So you touched on earlier that 3-year period is key. So you want to get the academy to 3 years, and the school is pretty comfortable with how it's all operating, and then they can kind of look after themselves from that kind of perspective. So that initial 12, 36 months, what does implementation look like? So school signs you up and say, hey, Jimmy, let's lock and load for next year, ready to go.
Yep.
What does that implementation process look like?
Yeah, we actually usually sign a school for 5 years. We have a pretty busy first year. But I guess to your point, what I'm sort of saying is, if you were doing it by yourself, it might take 3 years to get you to where we could get you in the first year.
Yep.
At that 5 year mark, it's running really well. But we've now got schools that are coming up to their 5 year mark that want to stay part of this network because of everything it offers. We've got a network of teachers now that from multiple different schools that love working together to develop and boost their own student engagement, their own academies. Literally last week we had 100 girls from 4 of our schools get together for a rugby clinic, and our coaches mixed in and the girls mixed in. And we've got coaches that played international rugby, 3 World Cups, played front row and worked with all the front rowers there for rugby. And we had female coaches show up that have coached international teams and played at international level, that are working with the backs and the forwards and various different skill sets. So mixing that in is pretty powerful as part of our network. Our schools all organise extra games outside of what inter-school sport would normally be on the regular, and know that the game's going to be played in good spirit because of the standards we're setting there too. But back to your question in terms of what does the first year look like, we basically would start working with a school semester 2 in a planning phase to launch it as a fresh subject in semester 1 of the following year. So during that time, we've got to do a number of things. We've got to determine how it fits into that school's timetable. How many periods a day do they use? How many periods do they dedicate to the academy class? Generally, we run our academy classes from as early as we can, but from where they start their elective program, we'd use that block to run this. And then we run it all the way through year 12 with as much accreditation as we can. So we map that out a little bit. The single most important part of student engagement is who's delivering the course, and so you need to have an educator in there that builds amazing rapport and trust with the students, and also has the coaching background to deliver this as an elite program when it comes to the sport. So what we do for most of our schools as part of our services, we do a recruitment drive. Some sports are easier than others. Rugby union in Victoria is not that easy to find a qualified rugby union teacher, so we cast a pretty wide net to places like New Zealand as well to find a qualified teacher that can deliver that and has the coaching background. The good thing about when you cast that net to New Zealand is they've seen, particularly obviously our rugby cohort's heavily Pacifica, kids from New Zealand, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji. They've seen success in that New Zealand school system for those kids, academic success, and they know how to gain and build rapport there. So it's often a win when you bring a teacher over from New Zealand for something like that. So we do that recruitment. We spend a lot of time informing the students about what program's about to get launched next year, and the families. We do family information type things. We set up what their data collection will look like. It's not much good doing a program like this and saying, oh yeah, they're super engaged, but there's no evidence for that. So weekly our schools send in data through a data tool that we've developed that monitors attendance and behaviour, monitors things like GPA, which is sort of progress reports, elite behaviours when it comes to learning. So do they do their homework? Do they participate in class discussions? Do they come prepared? All the things that they're going to need to do when they're in the real world as well with the job. So we do a whole lot of that planning and get it ready to go. We have a uniform supplier, so they get a cool sort of Puma uniform that's potentially branded to a professional team as well. So that's a big carrot for the kids, and we fit them out for that kind of stuff. So we're just building it up. Towards the end of that year, we invite all these teachers that are going to be delivering the program next year to professional development, and they mix in with our established teachers and they learn about various different processes. And then we map out curriculum. So a huge part of what we deliver is you can't just run this as a subject and stay on the field the whole time. There has to be some learning and link to curriculum. So we have a learning management system with sort of 16 different units relating to sport, but improving literacy, numeracy, and science skills as well as PE. So we have practical units in there like strapping and taping, where they're learning how to strap up knees and shoulders and things like that, exposing them to career and physiotherapy. We have heavily sports science focused ones for certain demographics as well. So effectively, physics, motion and energy under a sporting context, and, how does it apply to sport, and how can you, run faster, hit harder, all those different things, use leverage to your advantage in a sport like cricket. So we map all that out for that demographic of kids that we're delivering, and we create those links with our peak sporting body partners as well. So it's a busy first year getting things going, and then we get to launch it and sort of hold the teacher's hand in the setup of that, and then we can dial back our sort of week to week involvement a little bit. All the support's there, but then the focus becomes on building standards and growing and expanding that academy over the next few years, and also lobbying, the state government and various other funders to support the growth of that school. A lot of schools in Victoria don't have great facilities when it comes to sport, so we support them in that because we're a not-for-profit. We have access to donors and supporters and grants that maybe schools don't, that can help develop the program more.
And the schools that this is being implemented into, is it predominantly public schools? Is it private? Is it a mix?
It's predominantly low socio government schools, yep. We do have a couple of low fee paying Catholic schools sort of in the Melton area, which have a lot of the same challenges that the government schools have in terms of engagement and particularly with certain multicultural demographics. But yeah, a lot of our schools are in low socio Western Corridor, Northern Corridor and Southeastern Corridor, in the outer suburb sort of side of things, and that's the kind of schools I've always taught at too, and it's the ones I'm most passionate about, keeping those kids engaged in school and finding success. So there's lots of challenges within the government school, public school system, with funding and everything else, and we just try to, I put my Kiwi hat on and run everything by the sniff of an oily rag as best we can and get the greatest impact out of a dollar that we possibly can. And it is massive. Like, it's not just the impact it has on the school, but those kids are becoming healthier and better community members, and they're joining a community club as part of this and getting more involved. It makes for safer and healthier communities long term. Some of the education that they bring home around nutrition comes back to their family as well, and it helps in that sense. And you mentioned before with some of the issues we're having with youth justice, and kids taking that wrong track with violent crime and things, and something like 96% of kids in the youth justice system here in Victoria didn't finish school, didn't play team sport, didn't find that sense of community. Like we have a saying in New Zealand, the kids in sport stay out of court, and it's, we're not a silver bullet for that program, but we know that there's a massive thing if we can capture those kids and get them into a team instead of a gang and keep them connected to school where they're supported. They've got a lot better chance in life to do the right things. Yeah.
It's a great parallel you draw there between a sports team community and then a gang, because a gang is still a community at the end of the day, and it's just kids are always going to be drawn to finding somewhere that they can belong. And if we can make them find that in sports or otherwise, remove them from the gang community side of things, the positive communities, it's only a better outcome for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of the sports that you're running now, so you started with the rugby, and that was the initial draw card there. You touched on a few other sports throughout the conversation so far: cricket, AFL, and I think we were saying before we came on to the recording, golf is looking like it's going to be coming into the mix as well.
Yeah, we started with rugby union, initially with the Melbourne Rebels, and now with Rugby Australia, the national governing body. There's something amazing about rugby union in terms of it does engage at times an at-risk demographic here in Australia, which is Māori and Pacifica students. But there's also some amazing values in rugby union. It's probably one of the few sports you'll see in the world where there's a 6'7", 130 kilogram player walking up to a tiny little ref and saying, "Excuse me, sir, could I talk to you for a second?" So it's some of the values that we love to see in our students. It's a sport that practices discipline and respect, and there's a lot of sports that have those values as well, but it's really profound in rugby union.
I've never met a rugby player that is not friendly and the most lovely person.
Yep.
We were filming up for the Unisport Nationals last October, and there was so many different disciplines of rugby, some I hadn't even considered before, being from Victoria. And as you're saying, there's these big boys, big girls, and you're like, they look scary from a distance because they're so big, and they go and talk to you, and they're the most friendly people ever. They're just lovely people.
It's probably one of the most special things about the sport is, you could be doing an OE or shooting off as a rugby player, and you could walk into a rugby club in Canada and you'll get the same welcome that you would get at a rugby club in Australia or New Zealand, South Africa or Japan or wherever you go. That culture's always been the same. There's very few times you play a game of rugby where you don't mix in with the team after the game. When you're young, you'd have a cordial or something like that. When you got a bit older, you had a beer. And some sports can't believe that, that two bitter rivals like the All Blacks and the Springboks could be having a beer after the game. That's the great thing about sport, is how it can bring people together. It's the spirit that you see in the Olympics as well, but it's not always the spirit you see in some sports. So that's why rugby jumped out first. Obviously, I was passionate and came from that background in New Zealand. The next sport we expanded to was cricket. So we met with Cricket Victoria's CEO, a great guy called Nick Cummins, that sees the landscape of cricket and the future of cricket really well and clearly. And what I was sort of saying to him is a lot of our schools that were getting rugby going in with a big Pacifica demographic also have a quite strong South Asian demographic. So kids from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, say no more when it comes to cricket. Massive interest there. Yeah. And he said, well, yeah, actually, when we look at some of our statistics here in Victoria, something like 85% of registered cricketers are still Anglo-Saxon. And that probably means we're missing engaging a big unit of those South Asians. They're coming into Australia and they're playing cricket. They're playing, at times, disorganised cricket. And you might see them if you drive out to sort of areas like Point Cook in June in the rain. You're going to see them still playing cricket. It's not cricket season, so
they just love the sport so much.
Love it, yeah. What's a foreign concept a little bit to the Indian families and parents is that over there that they're not necessarily playing sport for school's for learning, and there's a lot of pressure on those students to become doctors and engineers. Apparently there are only two careers that sort of exist. They're very keen on their science, but something that they're not getting from those textbooks is those soft skills that we're talking about, like how do they stand out when they come to being a communicator, confidence and leadership and resilience and all those kind of things that sport can teach. So yeah, so we signed a partnership with Cricket Victoria. Our schools that are in the southeast are Melbourne Stars branded schools, and the schools in the northwest are Melbourne Renegades. And that was quite cool too, because I don't know if you remember when the Big Bash started up, that those two teams came along and they both said Melbourne, and people kind of just decided who they were going to support. And we didn't realise that if we're in the southeast, we should have been Stars fans. And so there's a little bit of geography there, but if you're quite a new family coming in from a different country, it's quite cool that the kids come home with Melbourne Stars on their uniform, and the family's like, oh, we should jump on the Melbourne Stars and support them. So there's a lot of wins for the sporting bodies that we partner with in terms of visibility of the sport and the brands. But yeah, we set up cricket. We're now about to go into our, as of 2027, we'll have I think 7 cricket academies going. Maybe more. We'll see where we land. But yeah, the kids have got to go out to Sheffield Shield match, watch a bit of Sheffield Shield, then go and meet the CEO and some players and people that work behind the scenes, and understand that there's all these cool jobs and marketing and different things at cricket. You don't have to be a professional cricket player. And then they're all getting community umpiring accreditation, so something to put on the resume when they don't have a network and they've never had a job before, and actually earn pretty good money. I thought about becoming an umpire myself. I think it's $180 a game. It's not bad.
It's not bad.
Yeah, especially if you're umpiring on a day where there's rain forecast. You might only need 2 balls to be bowled and you get paid and shoot home. So when you tell kids that there's opportunity like this, their eyes light up and they see another reason. I can be academic at school and get the sporting side of things. And so the curriculum that we cater for Cricket Academy might be more heavily on sports science and maths focus, where they can still pursue that pathway of doctor or engineer that they want to do, but they get that healthy balance of playing sport as well. Then we signed up with Basketball Victoria, and we've launched our first basketball academy this year. And as a sport, basketball's becoming a real juggernaut. It's very popular in Australia. It's visible. You're seeing the NBA and you're seeing Australians in the NBA, which is exciting for kids. The NBL's doing a good job and getting more viewership and attendance. And then Basketball Victoria are really good operators. They've got amazing staff out there. I don't know if you've ever been out to the State Basketball Centre, but it's probably one of the best facilities in the world.
It's sensational.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And that just goes to show Victoria loves to be number one when it comes to sport, which is great. But it's reaching a lot of demographics. It's really accessible for kids to play. You don't need a ton of kids to play it, and it's all year round indoors. It's pretty consistent. Cricket, the heavens can open up, it might be cancelled, and that's part of the parcel with cricket. But basketball is going really well, so yeah, we're throwing a lot of support in there, and it's got good reach to multiple demographics, including some African kids over here that are pretty overrepresented in some of the youth justice that we're talking about as well. So yeah, that's been good. We're sort of we have launched an AFL Academy this year, and we're just finalising a partnership with AFL Victoria. Particularly focused on that NGA pathway, which is Indigenous and multicultural kids. Again, having a chat with the head of AFL out there, there's a lot of my schools that would prefer a rectangle field because they're so multicultural. It's soccer, rugby. AFL is a little bit of a foreign concept. It certainly was for me when I moved over, and so I think it's a great sport, and they've got the ability to engage the community here, and they're really keen to do that and see. Not just some kids go on to professional contracts from backgrounds that we wouldn't traditionally see in AFL, but, become a goal umpire or become an administrator that comes from a different background there. Yeah, and the conversations are heating up a little bit with Golf Australia too, and we see that actually as a really good way to link in one of the demographics that haven't necessarily linked in well with sports so far, which is some of our Asian kids from China and Korea and Japan. Like it's a really popular sport there, and so we're pretty likely to launch our first golf academy at one of the schools in the southeast next year that has that demographic, and the principal's really keen to get that not only elite academics but also some elite sport that goes with it. That's the missing piece for a lot of these schools that maybe are focused only on the academic and what gets published, and they want to see some success on the sporting field as well. So yeah, don't ask me for tips on golf. I'm not a great golfer.
Same here.
But yeah, it's whatever. At the end of the day, it's whatever sport works with the kids. What engages them, what sucks them, and this model works for whatever sport that may be. But if we can provide a little bit of pathway and career exposure as part of it, and working with the governing bodies that their first focus is on community sports, not on making money or whatever, that's who we tend to want to partner with. Yeah,
that's fantastic. It's growing so fast and so broadly as well, and introducing different sports, as you say, is addressing a different contingent of a culture of children, which is fantastic, because not everyone's going to enjoy rugby, not everyone's going to enjoy cricket. If we can kind of touch on each different area of interest, it's beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like it's exclusive to those groups either. Like my first rugby academies, I had kids from Lebanon and the north of India and Punjab and that playing rugby and getting in for the first time. But that's kind of what their mates were doing. We had kids in there from Australian backgrounds and whatnot, mixing in with kids from Samoan backgrounds, and they were learning more about each other's culture and mixing in and becoming mates. And that's the beauty of sport. They don't have to kind of all be segregated, but that's the key is you're actually bringing Australia together as a big melting pot. And I know there's plenty of people that try to separate and pull things apart, and we see it nowadays with certain political parties, and that it's just not Australia. Australia's built on and strong because of this multicultural cohesion. Sport's one of the ones that can bring everybody together in a room, particularly if they're barracking for the same team,
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there's very few nations in the world that love their sport more than Australia do.
That's right.
It's ingrained in us from day one.
Yep. Massive sporting market, and it's a huge part of why we love living here.
You're coming up to 20 plus academies now, correct?
Yep.
How do you ensure consistency across each of those academies? Limited resources, you're not for profit, so that's always a tough challenge on its own. How do you ensure that each school's getting that same service and excelling just as much as someone else?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it is the biggest challenge right now is that scale up, and everybody sort of tells you it's coming, because for a long time it was Jimmy Orange's academy movement and I was the face and everything else, and people would always ask you that question, well, how's it scalable? How does it scale up? So far we've managed really well with that, and I've now got people approaching us to join our board. Invite me to your board, I'd love to join your board, and they're coming in with some pretty heavy skill sets, and we're at that point where we're doing some board strategy of all the people that come in to support us. First and foremost, have to believe wholeheartedly in the impact that we can make on youth. That's the main driver of our core part of our business. But what can they bring in? And so I've been lucky enough to have existing members on our board and some new ones coming in that have got far smarter than me in certain areas and can bring a new skill set. And also from our employee perspective, our consultants and people on the ground, we've got guys coming in again that have that skill set. We're in a world now that there's some amazing ways to make things more efficient if you build the right systems, and so our focus has been heavily on that. Hiring more employees is very expensive, and we need to do it, but we need to be careful about how we do it. But first we need to ensure that our systems are really efficient, our processes are really efficient, so that you're dead right, we're not going to lose any quality with our schools. Like I'd say my first school that I got under Academy Movement, for the first year, it was just me in that one school, so they got a lot of me attention. Yeah. We don't want to lose that as we get more and more academies, but what we have been able to do is build, really efficient IT systems and survey systems and different things like that to speed up the process. There's far less manual work that we're having to do there. It's not a full rinse and repeat per school. Every school's completely different, but we're getting a good understanding of the different systems within these schools and how we can best make this work. And when we're in those discussions with a school and ready to sign them off, if there's some red flags that say, hey, this actually might not work so well if that's the way you want to run it, we just walk away. It's going to be more headaches than it's worth if it's not actually going to fit the model of that school. People often say, well, get some private schools, like they've got plenty of money, you can do it this way. And private schools don't necessarily have maybe the same issues of student disengagement that we do, and they might not necessarily see dedicating class time to this as important as something else. So we'll work with them if it's going to work, but if it's not, or if it's just about the branding without any of the rigor behind it or the work behind it, then it's not necessarily a good fit for us. So we just want all of our schools to get mutual benefit out of this, and hopefully when a school that's very similar to this, one of our schools, calls up to say, hey, what's it like, they say all the right things. Our goal is to offset our costs completely to a school over that long term through student retention, student enrolment, grants and donations and things like that. And we've been pretty successful in doing that so far. Yeah.
If you're to look back on when you started versus what you know now, what would you wish you had known at the very start?
It's a good question. It's part of the journey, isn't it? Learning on the go. I think for a lot of people out there when they're starting a business, they're so desperate to get that first foot in the door, that first contract or that first sale or whatever it may be. So you've got to be able to find that balance between, hey, there's going to be some early adopters here that we've got to look after, and maybe the contract's not as favourable to us as to them and things like that. I think not being afraid to outlay a little bit of money where it needs to be, whether that's legal or accounting or marketing or whatever it may be. Some of those things you've got to do. I've been really lucky, I think, to have the right advisory sort of committee that's not official as a board, but the right advisors in there to help me understand the things I don't understand. I think if you're new to business, it's appealing for a lot of advisors because you're not coming in with preconceived ideas of this is how it's done. I've been told that a few times, that I'm a bit of a sponge and happy to be moulded in certain ways, and I guess be assertive and push back on the non-negotiables, which is some of our core values that we try to do. But yeah, it's hard to pinpoint any one thing that I'd wish I'd known, because I'm still learning that as we go, and it's going to be a really new journey as we get along. Of course, there's certain things that maybe in the early stages I see that was worth dedicating time to that might not have been. But I think you just got to learn from every study. You got to trust your gut a little bit when it comes to, there could be a few red flags here, and you've got to be, which we've always tried to be, as transparent as we can, but get your processes right, so that if anybody ever says, oh, we weren't aware of that, or we were under this understanding, it's pretty clear and obvious that you didn't read something that maybe you should have, because it was all there, and we made that really clear throughout. So yeah, I think just being open and transparent as much as you can is huge. But I don't know if there's any one thing that I'd be like, oh, I wish I'd known that back then, because it's just been part of the journey, which has been exciting. And still, it's every single day, it's still the same. There's probably some amazing things that I still don't know that I wish I had at the time, but then you develop and go, oh, cool, yeah, we'll do that. That's an exciting new part of what we're trying to put together, our model. Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty more exciting learnings to come as well.
Absolutely, yeah, every day. It's we're lifelong learners, and we even knew that in teaching. It wasn't like I got to 17 years of teaching and thought I know everything there is to know about teaching. I think teachers that think that, or professionals that think that, are probably doomed for failure, because you got to keep evolving. Like, who would have thought 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we had all this AI doing what it's doing? Talk about a change. Like, I'd liken that to the big jump when we got the internet. It became a really different world. It's a pretty significant jump. It's changing jobs. It's changing the way we do things, and we have to adapt to that. I weirdly got a call the other day on the phone. Someone trying to sell me a solar battery. I'm sure we've all sort of had that kind of stuff.
Multiple times every week.
Yeah, every week. Yeah, it's the challenge of having a business, because you can't block your number.
Yeah,
because
it's
you've got a
everywhere.
business. And this guy on the other end, he was saying, solar battery rebates. I was like, oh mate, I'm actually not interested. My roof's actually quite difficult to put solar on. And he's like, oh yeah, fair shout. Like, the batteries do work better with solar. I was like, yeah, they do. Yeah. And then he kept pushing for this battery, to sell this battery. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm getting really fast response. I said, hold on a minute, am I talking to AI or a real person? And he goes, no, I'm a virtual assistant. And I was like,
oh, no way.
That's why you don't know anything. Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
But this is sort of the world we're about to live in. Like, I thought I was talking to a real person for a while, until they made no logical sense about what they were talking about. And we've all had those conversations with ChatGPT where they've missed the mark, or the input's not right. But I'm assuming that AI machine will go away and learn from that conversation that you shouldn't keep pushing a battery when you can't get solar panels on your roof.
Hopefully you've just saved another soul from a harsh sales call.
Yep. So no, we've got to I think there's a lot of people who are going to fear for their job and things like that, but you just got to adapt and learn it's going to be part of our world in some way. It might get more regulated, I'm not sure, but I think back to my days in school when we were learning maths and we were learning long division, and the teachers say you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket for the rest of your life, and it turns out we do. So I guess we're going to have this, but it's still being able to recognise when it's doing the wrong thing and whatnot. So yeah, I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, it was quite an interesting story to have that experience of. I got a phone call from AI, and I thought I was talking to a salesperson. Yeah.
What's clear in everything you've just spoken about is the focus on behavioural impacts. And you spoke about the advisory committee that you've had, the board. Yes, you're a sponge and you're willing to absorb information and mould based on people's experiences that are superior to yours, which is fantastic. But you also mentioned that you're happy to knock people back where required and say, no, this needs to obey our core values, our beliefs, which is fantastic. And that also aligns to the rollout of the academy into schools, because you're saying, look, it doesn't matter how good you are at the sport, you have to be attending all your classes, you have to show your discipline, you have to be respectful, all that kind of stuff we've touched on so far. So it's clear that it's a behavioural based program and belief, which is, I think, is absolutely brilliant. Looking to the future and knowing what is out there in terms of other programs similar to yours, there is that focus on just the elite pathways and using it rightly or wrongly as a selling the dream to that elite pathway. So how do you see academy movement or programs like yours evolving in sport in education over the coming years? How do you see them aligning, and do you think there's going to be more of an uptake from schools around wanting to build out an academic program alongside sport, or it's going to continue to be, look at the shiny object over here that we can just pull some money from you for, but there's no real outcome for you?
Yeah, I definitely think we've got to ramp up sport in school, but link it to academic rigour and academic pathways, more than just doing VCE/PE. Like, how can we use that context to engage more? And look, that's true for any subject that engages kids. Like if it's art or whatever it may be, student engagement and learning has to be key. Maths has basically been taught the same for 500 years. There's very little. I found I struggled to find maths interesting at school. I enjoyed working things out and sometimes the black and white of it all, it's either right or wrong. Whereas English I found even harder because I was like, well, there's grey area.
So many interpretations.
Oh, yeah. me and my English teachers used to get into debates all the time and they loved it. But I found physics way more interesting because there was more application of the maths. And so, we do units on statistics of sport where they can start actually applying statistics to a sporting context. Cricket's obviously a great example of statistics in sport, but there's careers in this, like where that data is vital for player selection and analysis. And if you take it on face value and you just look at a player's batting average, it can be quite misleading. Like they might have a sensational average against low opposition on Australian soil, but what are they like playing in India on their wickets, and what's their average look like? If kids don't understand that, that's where there's an application. I mean, how many times did maybe you or your classmates ask in maths class, when am I ever going to use this?
Oh yeah, there was something like in school, that's for sure.
Maths all the time. If you don't have a decent numeracy understanding, you're also going to get ripped off in life, like not actually having an understanding of how to pay your bills and quote and those kind of things. There needs to be a little bit of a shift. And if sport's the context that those kids are interested in, then we should do more of that. The next one's probably the tertiary pathway. Like cricket, Victoria doing something really cool in partnership with RMIT, which is a Melbourne Cricket Education Academy. And effectively it's like year 13 cricket of what we do. So they get some really cool on the ground cricket from some extremely high level coaches, and Michael Beer, former Test cricketer for Australia, is heading that up. Outer Junction Oval and the classrooms out there, and they're getting a a diploma as part of this, all they've got to do is finish year 12 to get there. They don't have to worry about the ATAR. But if they complete that full year, they get automatic entry into a second year business degree.
Brilliant.
So I found like
Brilliant.
a side entry there using sport and their passion for sport. And we obviously want to filter a lot of kids into that aren't too sure. They need that time. They know they're loving their cricket, but want to get exposed. But some of the opportunities they're getting out there, and a lot of them are getting offered jobs at Cricket Victoria. They're building a network out there. They're understanding what it's like to be in a professional environment with people walking around from marketing and the CEO and everything else, and they're meeting these kind of people. So I'd like to see more universities bring something like that in, where there's a carrot for a kid just to finish year 12 to go and continue on with their sport. They're going to get some elite training, and it's going to give them an opportunity to go on to the higher honours from a sporting perspective. But what a great way to get your foot in the door from a tertiary study point of view as well. So I think that's the future. We've seen it jump up a little bit. I know there's a couple of AFL clubs that are doing a similar kind of program, but we'd like to link up more like that and be able to show a full pathway to tertiary study and careers. We talk about careers a lot with kids. There's a difference between a career and a job. Job, you can get paid really well to do a job in Australia, something you don't like, but whether that's working in a factory or whatever, you can still get paid pretty well. Is it fulfilling? Do you excited about it every morning? Do you feel like you can grow in it? Do you feel you've made an impact in what you're doing? Is it something you're passionate about? Probably not. Do you enjoy the paycheck? Sure. But that's not a career from my point of view. So I think there's a lot to be said around that too.
I think that's a great initiative, that the tertiary program there, and as you said, hanging the little carrot out and saying just get to year 12, finish that off, and then you've got this opportunity that is available to you, and it still buys you a little bit of time to then consider what you want going into the future. Because as we know, so many kids leave school and they say, I don't know what to do, and I have time off, or they'll go and travel, which is that's fine, no problems with that, but they can still have that time to think while still gaining additional skills, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think careers traditionally haven't been done overly well at schools. And, we talked a little bit about AI and things before. Like, there's a lot of these careers that might not even exist in 5 years' time. So giving yourself a little bit of time to stay engaged is huge. But it helps with some of the kids that year 12, it's a lot of pressure to just, I've got to get this ATAR and go straight to uni. Who knows what could have happened to that kid in that year? They could have lost a family member. Parents get divorced. They could just throw a huge spanner in the works of a kid that was going down the right track, and it changes everything. This is just a little bit of opportunity to reset. Like, I certainly felt like when I finished school, I had to get a certain score and go do my course straight into uni. That's what success looked like. There's a lot of different ways to do that nowadays, and uni was probably some of the best years of your life, and the people you meet. And I know in New Zealand, most of us had to leave home. There's not that many universities in New Zealand, so if you grew up in a town like me, you had to go somewhere, and that's when you develop into that different stage of your life. But there's, I don't think necessarily everything I studied at uni translated to what I did here, but following your passion is probably the first thing I'd say, and if unis can be more adaptable in that, the courses they offer around that, I think they get a better uptake, and again, you're nurturing and developing these students into more well-equipped young people going forward after they finish their studies.
Yeah, agreed. If you could change one thing about academy movement as it is today to improve the program for schools and for children in the future, what would that be?
I know from our operational perspective, it's interesting, we're doing a marketing podcast now, but we've got to put a bit more into marketing. We've like I said, we've run pretty sniff of an oily rag for things, and I believe we've got a really good product here, and it's just getting the word out there a little bit more about what we do and how we do it. It's the funding side of things. Like, we want to make this as accessible as we can to schools and students, and so we have all these societal outcomes that we're improving, and we know that there's people out there that have deep pockets and would love to support something like this. So I think investing in that charitable arm of what we do to give that back to schools and students is definitely something we're looking at. There's lots of successful foundations out there that effectively employ people to bring that money in, and some people look at that and go, "Oh, it's a charity or whatever. Why are you employing people to do this stuff?" But what they don't understand is that by having someone employed to do that, there's a lot more money actually coming into the charity.
It's the down the line return.
Yeah. The return there and the impact that you can have. We're lucky enough to have a tick of approval from the Department of Education. So we have some funding for certain schools to offset our costs and get into those key target schools a little bit easier. I said to my wife when I started out, like, to be recognised by the department would be a massive achievement, and to have that now, and we've now got a second round of funding as a preferred supplier for early intervention for schools. So we're on a drop-down menu where they can access our program in a really high-risk area. So that's another, to, I guess, be backed by the state government twice is huge. But you just don't know what's going to happen with state government. Like it could be change. A new government come in, all that kind of stuff. So we want to know that we've got some financial support when we need it, when we can approach a donor and say, hey, we've actually got 3 schools interested, and one of the biggest barriers I've got is just the financial side of things to get it up and running. So that's something you want to support. It's great. It's not like they just have to, we get all this money in and then we don't use it, or we're not using it for its intent. We would, but those are probably the big things that we need to market it and get it out there, get the word out there a bit more, and keep hopefully drawing in some philanthropic support to give back to kids, just to help them pay their fees, and schools to help get some new equipment and all of those kind of things that we really want to support them with, and further offset our costs where we can. Yeah.
Fantastic. As we finish up this afternoon, one final question for you, and it's a finish the sentence kind of style. So, a modern brand succeeds when it is willing to do what?
Our modern brand succeeds when it's willing to do what? I think it's adapt and learn. Yep. We've got to adapt with the times. We've got to look at new initiatives, and we can't stay stagnant in what we do. Like, we had really good success when I started the first academy, the academy movement. If I just sat back and go, hey, it works every time, just do it the same every time and not adapt, you're not foolproofing yourself for the future, and you're not going with the times, because at some point that old model's not going to work anymore. You've got to have a whole bunch of new things. So yeah, a modern brand has to adapt to its market, to change, and continue to strive to improve, I think.
Fantastic, Jimmy. Thank you. It's been phenomenal. I've loved learning more about it, and we've said it a few times, so I'll say it again. The impacts that you are having on children in particularly lower socioeconomic areas is profound. And it's clear that the program works. You've had countless case studies now to show that. And I wish you all the best, because you're doing some groundbreaking stuff. And it's so good to see that there is actual behavioural change happening in these communities, which is fantastic.
Yep. Well, absolute pleasure to be here, mate. Love the setup, and hopefully the people who are listening get something out of it, and happy to do it any time again.